Hello, welcome to another episode of Coffee with Mirko. I'm your host, Mirko Balmassar from Coffee Fixation, and I'm happy that you're here. I hope you're safe, hope you're well, and if you're new, welcome. Welcome to another episode where we talk with coffee professionals from all over the world, and always good to have you. And if you're new, just feel free to share this with your friends. Just take a screenshot and share this talk with your friends on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. We're trying to grow this little family here. We're waiting for Andre Eiermann, which is just tuned in. So without further ado, let's bring him on.
Good morning.
My man, good morning to you.
Well, good evening. It's Melbourne time. I still cannot put it into my head.
Well, I think soon. Eventually you will once you come over this side of the world. But it's good to see you, and thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. It's amazing to have you and having a chance to chat with you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's an absolute honor when you see the whole lineup of super coffee professionals you talk to. So you make my day very often, maybe without even knowing it, but it's amazing during lockdown having or listening, sometimes maybe not watching, but always listening to your discussions. Is totally outstanding, really motivating.
Thank you, I appreciate it. But I am the one who's honored to have you on because of your amazing coffee career, which brings us. And I'm glad that you listen to the podcast so that you kind of know what you're in for. You're prepared.
I'm prepared. Wait for my answer when you ask me with whom I want to have dinner. I had a long time to prepare.
I love it. Andre, can you just give us a bit of an idea of what has been so far your coffee career and your journey?
Yes, it's a pleasure to always talk about my career. I'm an old man with a lot of gray hair. So I started my career around 20 years ago. And I started as a junior coffee trader. And I was super lucky to have been sent after 9 months only to Kenya and Tanzania. So I spent for about 1 year most of my time in cupping labs or in dry mills, wet mills, and on coffee farms. And I tasted around 400 to 800 cups of coffee a day. So I was brutally untalented when it came to cupping, but after a couple of hundred of coffees every day, even an untalented marketing student will get the vocabulary into his head and the taste buds in your mouth trained. And after that, I thought I should become a super creative fashion photographer. So I quit coffee. I went into fashion photography and graphic design in London. But then, as the guy told me during my interview with Folk Cafe, so the green coffee company I worked for, he said, once you start in coffee, you will stay in coffee until the end of your life. So I entered the coffee business again, and then I spent several years always in marketing with commercial coffee roasters. And that's somehow how I ended up. And a couple of years ago, I got more into specialty coffee. I started again to travel to origin. So I started with Honduras, then Costa Rica, Guatemala, Rwanda, El Salvador. So I had a full immersion into coffee origin again. And I did a little detour, and I even competed at coffee championships. And as always, if you don't feel the pressure and you follow your passion and you're surrounded by good people, you start being lucky. And somehow I won the Swiss nationals, went to the Worlds, and I had also a great connection to my Italian family. They're producing coffee machines, so they pushed me, and somehow that was my coffee journey. Totally unplanned.
Which is fantastic. Like, I mean, considering the fact that you were just, yeah, like you said, you just entered the competition just for the sake of it, and you ended up winning the Swiss championship and still make a top 10 in the world. It's such an outstanding result. And to give context to the audience, even though it's a tricky question, but what are you currently doing in terms of like what's sort of, I know that, you know, you've been stuck in lockdown, obviously.
I'm totally stuck in lockdown, so I should have left at the end of March towards Australia. So I was supposed to live and work in Melbourne by now, but just 9 days prior to departure, the borders got shut. So I have no home. I'm homeless in my home country, and I had to escape into the Swiss Alps, and I'm living now in a friend's place in like a vacation area. And I use the time to listen to many podcasts. I do a lot of live sessions. You have virtual farm trips, which are amazing. So for example, last year I boarded nearly 88 airplanes. This year I haven't been flying at all. But I haven't been on so many coffee farms this year, haven't been in my life before the whole life. So I'm doing a lot of this. I'm reading, as you might know, I'm very much into coffee science. So I'm reading many scientific articles about coffee extraction, both brewing as well as espresso. And this is super time consuming because it's a different way how scientists write about coffee. So it takes me to read an article 5 to 10 times to halfway understand it, and then I will call maybe my friends from the University of Applied Science in Zurich, the team around Professor Chaham Yerityan, to explain to me what's the key takeaways in a scientific article. And that's how I draw.
But still, even though you're in lockdown, you know, I've heard that they call you Mr. Productivity, and you're definitely confirming that, because even in lockdown you're keeping busy. First, we'll go back into productivity in a second. Chris Lukakis is saying hi, and everybody else saying hi, and we say hi back. And Don Bacon is asking, what resources on the science of coffee would you recommend? That's a great question.
This is really a very good question. It is very interesting. I would assume that most of the followers will be from the specialty coffee industry. But when we look at coffee science, there will be like the biggest roasters in the world, which have the big budget to finance the really interesting research. So I have been, for example, reading a lot of papers about capsule coffee extraction, because scientifically it is really fascinating. I've also read a lot about instant coffee. Yes, maybe it's not my favorable cup in the morning, but the techniques, the instruments behind are just very fascinating, because you have an extremely high yield, as producing freeze-dried coffees, for example, using a lot of energy, so it's very costly. So you need sometimes to go up to an extraction yield instead of 20% to 40, or sometimes even 60%. So understanding how science people do that is very interesting. So most specialty people think in specialty we know a lot, but apparently studying commercial coffee extraction is totally amazing. And I came across a PhD paper of a guy who worked for JDE, the second biggest roaster in the world. It's nearly 400 papers, and he's an engineer, and he is explaining or looking at coffee extraction from an engineering point of view. So, but I needed several people to explain that paper to me, but it is very interesting, and you learn a lot, and then you go back behind the Italian espresso machine, and the way you work, the way you think will be totally different. But then you need to come back to Mother Earth and talk to people in a normal way, because it's really far away. And some of the commercial roasters, I would say they are like 10, 15 years ahead of specialty coffee when it comes to extraction know-how.
I can resonate with that in terms of, I think that we often demonize commercial coffee, which there's a reason for it, but there is definitely, like most things in life, there's always a good side, and a side that we should look at instead of demonize and sort of getting inspired, but always be like, oh, hang on, maybe we should start by looking at doing things a little bit differently. And yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of being ahead of the game in certain aspects, for sure.
You know, for example, for WBC in 2017, I was actually using a technology. I was degassing the coffee with nitrogen, and that's actually a technology that has been invented 40 years ago by Eric Favre, the guy who invented the Nespresso capsule system. So can you imagine? You come with something on stage to make specialty coffee even more tasty that has been developed 40 years ago by a commercial coffee guy, and he was an engineer. So
yeah, there's such an application to so many facets of coffee when it comes to science, and I think that we're still young. I think we're still in the teenage phase, puberty as an industry, because if you look at what's been achieved in the past 15, 20 years, it really is a great outlook for the next 50.
absolutely. I think at the moment, coffee is moving at the speed of light. And when we look at coffee science, it's at the very beginning, and especially espresso extraction. We tend to say we understand, but when you talk to scientists, they are very clear. We are at the very beginning. We still don't understand a lot, but as more people are interested into it, and big companies, they put the funds into it, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we will see huge progress, and happily for us, we will taste even greater coffees in the near future.
Yeah, I'm very certain of it. And going back to the Mr. Productivity nickname that I've read about you, first, is it true? Second, what's your trick? But also, I think often productivity is one of those words that sit on a very fine line. You know, people say you gotta be productive, but it can also diverge people to feeling bad about themselves, beating up themselves for not being productive, and pushing themselves maybe too hard and start to be sleep deprived, and that actually goes to negative outcomes of burning out. So it's always a fine balance, isn't it?
It is definitely a fine balance. What I can say to Mr. Productivity is I have a great passion for coffee, and I'm a curious person. So I think passion and curiosity are my two main drivers, and like my rocket fuel that keep pushing me to go further. And then whatever I did now in coffee, I was always very clear. I was setting my goal, and I took all the decisions like autonomously, and I defined also my own purpose. And then inside me, I have like I want to master things. So you might have also read that I was an ultra trail runner, doing races for like 140 kilometers and things like this. So I like sometimes to go a little bit further, but I don't believe in no pain, no gain. I do such things because I like it. I do things because I move forward. But if it's too painful, I will stop. So it's just not doing it for the sake of doing it. It's just because my body wants to do it or my mind wants to do it. And when I started in coffee, I just didn't like the coffee in the office. So, and I was working in marketing. And, you know, it doesn't matter. You don't like the coffee. So I wanted to learn how to make a better coffee. And then somehow I get more interested in the beans, in the roasting, in the preparation, the grinding, the water. And as I'm a curious person with like a scientific background, maybe I went a little bit further than others. But it was always the passion that was driving me.
And I think it's fantastic, and I think it's so crucial to have that kind of self-awareness that enable you to actually activate the principle of patience, the principle of nothing is going to come easy, but it doesn't have to hurt, like you just said. And I'm the same. I don't believe in, I mean, it's a great sentence, no pain, no gain, and there's a lot of memes and there's a lot of connection with sports, but you're right. Like, if you hurt yourself to the point of injury, you're not going to be able to run the marathon that you've been training for. And like in the airplane, I made the example a couple of podcasts ago. You got to look after yourself first with the oxygen mask before you can look after somebody else. So I think that's another aspect. So yeah, absolutely. And what you just said about you just wanted to make better coffee in the office, we go back to a point that you made about 15 minutes ago. Once you're in coffee, there's no return. There's no come back. And it's so true. Like someone told this to me about 10 years ago. So, and I still am involved in coffee, and you are too. So, how important though is to narrow down or develop an understanding that you can juggle 8, 9, 12 different bowls on, different aspects around coffee, because it's competition, business, marketing, science, until you can understand, well, which one you really don't want to break of these bowls.
First of all, I was hired in the company I used to work for 7 years as a marketeer. So first priority was marketing, and I had to do all the marketing jobs because that's why what you get paid for. So it's important you do your duty. And then I did all the other things on the side. Nobody ever asked me to compete at championships. But if you especially work in marketing and not as a barista, you need to make yourself time to practice. So I remember when I went to the first Barista Jam, I was working or practicing after my marketing work 2, 3, 4 hours every day to get the espresso right, to texture the milk properly, to practice latte art. So that was maybe from 6 to 8 or 6 to 9 o'clock at night after work. And then I was interested in coffee science. So that was maybe from 9 to midnight. And then there were some podcasts I wanted to listen to. So that was maybe from midnight to 2 o'clock. So for the last 4 to 5 years, I haven't really been sleeping a lot. So
Sorry, it's great.
some people, they need more sleep, others need less, and I'm just a lucky one. That's I might need less sleep than others, but at the end of the day, it was hard work, you know. It's,
Nothing comes free, and it is hard work and it's dedication. And the passion obviously is so obvious and transparent when we hear the story that you just said. For context, how many hours do you sleep?
oh, it depends. Sometimes it's 4 hours or 5 hours. And you know, sometimes during the competition training, we just worked like 24 hours non-stop. So
That is very impressive. I struggle if I don't get 6.5, 7. But glad to hear there is people like you out there. Now, something that you know I'm very passionate about, and I want to take your perspective on it, is that coffee is often given for granted, and also which is just it's so available, right? You can get coffee pretty much everywhere in every country, but it wouldn't be possible without the people behind it. From origin to roasters, from baristas to consumers actually created that demand. How important is to not forget this element of people?
I think first of all, when we drink a cup of coffee, we would think about the origin. Because without the producers, without the pickers, without all the people involved in the value chain at origin, we in the consuming country wouldn't be able to enjoy any coffee at all. And maybe with other products, it's easier because the potato might come from your neighbor farmer, or the milk will come from the cow that you might see, or the fruits, you know, the strawberries, they grow just next door. Coffee is a product that grows normally far away from where you consume it. And we often forget about this. And when you look also how coffee started, there was a lot of slavery involved. So once coffee started, maybe we didn't start on the right foot. And now being far away from origin, we sometimes are a little bit narrow-minded, and we just think about let's make the coffee as tasty as possible. But when you look at the slogan from the Specialty Coffee Association saying make coffee better, it's really don't just make it tastier, but make it better in terms of make the entire coffee value chain more sustainable, be fair to everyone along this value chain. And this is, for me, the first priority should always go to the producing countries.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, it's where it all starts. There is no chicken and the egg here. That's how it is. There isn't. It starts on the tree, and it starts with the person who planted the tree. He's gonna take care of it and do the whole thing that you just described. Absolutely. And in this case, going back to the origin aspect, you know, we have a price crisis, we have a climate change that is, whether people believe it or not, that's like the whole planet Earth, flat or not flat. What could be, in your opinion, the single most effective action or change that someone could do to help the entire ecosystem of coffee?
You know, I think the model we have in specialty coffee about the direct trade, paying more or higher prices for better qualities is really, really, really good. And I think especially in Australia, where specialty coffee is already well established, I think the industry has a certain impact. when I look in other countries, for example, now my home country, Switzerland, specialty coffee is extremely niche. And there are only a few specialty coffee roasters. And don't get me wrong, they're doing the right thing. So they pay higher prices. They try to establish a direct relationship with farmer, and that is very good. So at the end of the day, some farmers will get more money, but just the size of those businesses is too small. So from my point of view, to really have a great impact, that's really a great impact also at origin, and not just touching a couple of already well-known specialty coffee farmers, we need somehow to move the commercial coffee industry towards the specialty coffee model. Because if those very large roasters, they would step up paying more, they would have a huge impact at origin immediately. You know, the company I work for, if you order coffee from Honduras, you will order 10, 20 containers. So if you buy a better quality and you pay more for that, and you support them with agronomists to produce a better quality, that would have a huge impact. Then when I started our specialty coffee line, I bought 1 or 2 bags from this farmer, 1 or 2 bags from this farmer. Yes, I paid a high price, but in total, the impact was not big enough. So I think that would be important to do. And, you know, in general, we have to move away from this shareholder thinking, creating more profit for a company. I mean, bottom line, yes, profit is important, because if you have a sustainable business, you want to help people, but your own business is not profitable, you will go bankrupt, so that won't help. But the other two P is like the people and the planet. That is so important. So we have to make sure that profit, but also people and the planet, they are in a harmonious relationship.
It's a triangle of P's: people, planet, profit. Very interesting. And just because you touched base on it, what do you think of the Australian coffee scene?
Difficult to say, you know. I have been to Australia so far only twice. Okay, it was love at first sight in February last year when I first came to Melbourne and I attended MICE, and I was swept away, and it was clear I wanted to move immediately to Melbourne, and I wanted to start working there immediately. I mean, compared to other countries, the specialty coffee industry is already well established. I had a chat with a friend. He's half Swiss and half Australian, and he said, okay, Melbourne is already like a shark tank for specialty coffee roasters, because there are already so many, and the quality is already very high, and both the roasters, the baristas, as well as the coffee lovers, they are already well educated. So I think you have already, compared to other countries, a very good level.
Okay, that's good to hear, and we really hope for you to be able to come here real soon. Even though it is an interesting situation that we are at, especially here in Melbourne. But I really can't wait to have you here and meet you in person too. And Andre, finally, we got the question that you most prepared. Now, out of the box question, halfway marks for the interview. Andre, if you could, who would you like to have dinner with? Can be anyone, and it doesn't have to be in coffee.
It will be in coffee, and it's very clear I would love to have dinner with Eric Favre. So he's the inventor of the Nespresso capsule system. He's no longer with them, I'm now reading his book, and it's just fascinating how like a science guy, an engineer, because he loves coffee, invented this system when he got inspired in a tiny little coffee shop in Italy. And I'm reading his book, and he's explaining how he was struggling being an entrepreneur, so an entrepreneur within one of the biggest companies in the world, that is normally wanting people to follow the rules, the hierarchy. And he was like trying to find his way to navigate through and to put this innovation on the road. So it's totally fascinating. And I know that he's traveling a lot, especially to Asia. He's also very much into tea. And in general, he's just interested about extracting things from any kind of product. So he's also working on grinding, and it's fantastic. And I'm totally fascinated by him. And I want to know how he came up with this crazy idea. Okay, I know maybe in terms of sustainability, we think it's no good, or maybe a lot of waste. So let's just put this away. But I just want to know how a guy like him came up with this.
And I think just briefly touching on this, I think we often, I'm reading a book called, which was actually recommended to me by Patrick Roth from April Coffee, and it's called Talking with Strangers. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting. Anyway, it's a great book. And it's interesting on how people just take certain truths just, by default. So, the truth is that, or the assumptions, that we make. So Nespresso, bad, like, right? And instead, if you really break it down, it's like, hang on, there's a little bit more here to see. It is an invention like a bicycle, a blender. It's been invented, like it didn't exist before that. And it is fascinating. Like you said, I think extraction, grinding are words that often we connect to coffee, but you can extract tea, you can grind spices, cocoa, like the list goes on.
But it's madness. This guy knew already 40 years ago about particle size distribution. So that's when we look at specialty coffee. It was Matt Perger who came up on stage with a spice grinder when everybody thought, okay, this guy must be mad. And he talked about the P-model particle size distribution. And this guy already knew it. Or now in specialty coffee, for example, some people say we should put like a filter paper on top and at the bottom of the puck, so you will get a more even extraction. Well, open this capsule. They have already started doing that 40 years ago. So it's really totally outstanding. And then, there are coffee machines where you can have like pre-wetting and things like this. That's already in this capsule. Or like the pressure buildup. So by the thickness of the aluminum mid in the front, you can steer the turbulences in the capsule to have a more efficient extraction. And this guy knew it already 40 years ago. And now we come up and we study it in specialty coffee. It's just super, super, super inspiring.
Yeah, and Los Cafés del Arriero saying his first capsule extraction design is awesome. So I'm sure you're familiar with that. Just a little bit.
This helps me now so much to understand our espresso extraction. But, it's not always about the extraction, but also the business model. And what we share is passion. And when you read his book, it's fantastic to see how this man is passionate.
And I think there's two elements here. One, we keep seeing cycles of going back to old trends and old fashions in fashion, in music, in art, in cinema, in a lot of spheres. So it's interesting on how often the new trends were old trends, but now they're going to be more expensive, right? Like Converse, right? Let's just say, for instance, All-Star Converse, or Air Jordans, right? Like, and the other element is connected to the next wave of coffee, whilst global pandemics, which Daniel Hobart said his prediction is that the fourth wave will be homebrewing. Obviously, it's also be how do you say it? Um, it's you know, it's a little bit of a cheeky statement. He knows that's not the case, but it will be. Like, home brewing is spiked up. Like I started brewing more at home. Usually I would just get a coffee out. How important then someone like this guy coming through and say, hey, we invented this 40 years ago, let's make it better, because that's all about invention. Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's interesting when I hear you talking about the fourth wave. So for me now, fourth wave is like more like third wave was like the real specialty. And then fourth wave here in Switzerland, we talk like more like a scientific approach, where, for example, you work with scales. So you know your dose in and you know your precise dose out. And then in Switzerland, we already talk about the fifth wave, which is all about automation. So maybe then in Switzerland, we should call home brewing already the sixth wave. But I was happy to see that so many people started to buy home brewing equipment. That's really good. And especially as now we have time to brew at home. It's not you wake up and you have to rush to work and you grab somewhere a coffee to go because you have to jump on a train and you have your first meeting. And now home office, no need to commute. So take 15 minutes time to brew coffee at home. And there were so many video tutorials how to do. I mean, that is now the best way to start learning how to brew coffee at home, I think.
You're absolutely right. And I think my comparison in terms of a positive outlook from this is food. So if my nonna knew that there were a TV show like MasterChef, she would be like, what do you mean? People are getting paid to go on television to cook and compete cooking? Like, it's just food, right? So I think that passion for cooking at home, people who really get into it, ingredients and their research recipes and they cook at home, what happens is that when they get out of their house, they start to appreciate more food. So they spend more, they dine in a particular way. They don't mind spending extra for a fine dining experience. And I hope that this home brewing, this home brewing movement that's coronavirus kind of helped in a way, will drive people to do the same, to appreciate more when their local coffee shop make a lovely manual pour. So hopefully they will start spending more on coffee. And we got a question from Don Bacon. Some people say fourth way is brewing at origin, which I can see. I can see that.
I think brewing at origin is important. I have been to many coffee origins, and it was a pity to see some coffee farmers, they produce an outstanding quality, but they have never ever tasted their own coffee. So that was very sad for me to see. And you brew coffee for them and suddenly they look at you and you tell them your coffee is outstanding and you see them starting to smile. So in 2015, when I went first time to Honduras, that's when eCafe started to establish coffee labs. So coffee farmers could actually taste their own qualities. Or for example, in Kenya, the Kenyans, they export the best beans and then they drink the worst quality that they cannot export at a decent price. So this is sad. So I think origin people, they should drink their best beans, similar to, for example, in Ethiopia.
And a challenge for that, after my chat with Chris Hendon, speaking of science, the challenge with that is that often water becomes an issue when it comes to origin in terms of the quality of the water whilst brewing.
Yes, for us, you know, we talk about roasting, and we have all the instruments to measure the process. Then we brew, and of course the machines we are using are temperature stable. The pressure is as we would like to set it. And then we talk about the water quality that is perfectly analyzed and sometimes even perfectly constructed. Well, you arrive at origin. The roaster is the roaster, whatever you get as an equipment. And then you have a grinder, and maybe not the perfect grinder. And the water is just the water that comes out of the tap, and you warm it up. There's no thermometer, and then you brew. But this is also fine for me. So maybe sometimes in our countries, we try to overcomplicate things. And we try to make a super high precision coffee, and we look for the most freaky flavor notes, and whatever is not perfect makes this cup of coffee a bad cup. And sometimes we should just turn it around and just brew in a simple way, and just look at the beautiful notes, the sweetness, and maybe if it's not the most complex one, just the easy flavors. If it's sweet, I don't know, some apricots or peach, perfect. And not look for what might not be 100% perfect in the cup.
I suppose the challenge that he was addressing is that often the difference of water will impact potentially the purchase or not purchase of that coffee. And then it might put the farmer in a disadvantaged point where perhaps the same coffee would have been scored in a different way, or would have been chosen by roasters when they cup that coffee with the water from, you know, their beautiful filtration systems in their own Q lab. Which is, but like you said, I like what you said, especially when it comes to consumers, and especially when we talk about making easier conversations like you and I doing. The research is fine, the science is beautiful, but sometimes we just got to bring it down to, did you like it?
Absolutely. I mean, I love science, and I am super precise when it comes to brew recipes, and I like to play around with the brewing temperature, and I know all the tiny little details of my water. But then sometimes I just want to have a cup of coffee. And some people, I realize, they're getting worried and scared and nervous to serve me a coffee. I'm not analyzing each and every cup, because then it's not you enjoy coffee. Then it's like it's work, and coffee should be fun. You should enjoy it. I think it's better to enjoy it together because it's a very social beverage. And then let's just have a chat, enjoy great hospitality, and a beautiful coffee is beautiful, done. No need to discuss too far, right?
100%. And recently someone reached out to me and they sent me a DM, and this person is in the coffee industry, well-being, and, you know, quite a reputation, and sent me a picture of their coffee in the morning, and it was made out of moccona. I'm not sure if you're familiar with moccona. Moccona is a staple in Australian homes as instant coffee, right? It's like, it's one of the first things you learned when you come to Australia. It's like moccona, right? And, you know, this person was kind of ashamed, and I was like, what's wrong with it? You grew up in Australia. It's a familiar flavor. It brings you back to childhood. Drink it. Did you enjoy it this morning? Yeah, it was delicious. So what? Beautiful. So we're going back and demonizing. Look, obviously there's aspects of it that's not cool, and I'm sure that, but that person knows that that's not a 90+ Panama coffee. So it's okay. Like you said, going back to sort of these questions, I'm very curious to see and hear your perspective around this. But before I go to my question, this Daniel has dropped a comment saying, can't wait for automation, take the emphasis from the process and the presentation and put it back onto the product. Oh, yeah, that's it. That's well put.
I think most important is coffee, when you prepare it, has to be prepared in a consistent way. And we should also look at who's first. First, as I said, the first priority is origin, the producers. And then it's very quickly the customers. It's not about, for example, me as a barista. This is not my morning show. The customer comes in, he wants to have his coffee. So I serve him the best coffee possible. And some of them are in a rush, so they don't want to know all the details that are written on the packaging. So I serve them the coffee as quickly as possible. I smile at them, I say goodbye, I wish them well and a nice day. This is more important. So it's the total experience that you get. And we as baristas sometimes should step down a little bit and really focus on hospitality and the customer.
You listen to my podcasts, you've heard me before saying this. I think that automation comes in handy to allow us to have deeper and more meaningful conversations with our customers, because we have an automated temp. We have a machine that pretty much whisper to us. We can nearly talk to machines. So that if we instead take an advantage of that and see that as, okay, well, now I've gained 25, 32 seconds. I can talk to Tom, John, Jennifer, or I don't know, Jacinta. Let's do that. Let's enhance their experience, because I don't know, and I would love to have, I really would love, but I don't have time, I'm busy enough, to run some crazy science tests and experiment to understand how much taste is impacted by how you overall feel when you're angry, when you're tired, when you're in love, when you're happy, when you're alone, when you're depressed. I would love to understand the same cup of coffee, well, as same as possible, how that would taste differently amongst different statuses. Because then if we found out that happiness and really being good would enhance the flavor, then why wouldn't we give that experience to the customer?
You know, we did tests in, you know, big marketing companies. Fortunately, they have the money to do such tests. So you do tests and serve people coffee, and there will be exactly those kind of questions. How they feel today, good or bad experience. And there is definitely a correlation between your mood and how you're going to score your coffee. I mean, score. Yeah, sorry for, it's not scoring. Is it tasty or not? I liked it more or less. That's what I mean by scoring. And then 100%. It's also, I mean, Professor Charles Spence, he did a lot of research on multi-sensory experience. How, for example, a chocolate tastes more sweet when the surrounding music is like more high pitch, or you perceive more bitterness when you hear some more low frequency music. He did some work on whiskey, how a whiskey tastes when you are in a like darker environment compared to a brighter environment. So it's super, super, super complex how we rate a coffee good, bad, best. So whatever surrounds you has a huge impact.
Well, then, based on that, really focusing on that people connection would make huge impact. Andre, I cannot believe that it's been 49 minutes already, and you know that what that means. I know, I'm surprised myself. So I'll first thank you again for coming in. It's been really interesting, and I'm going to rewatch a bits of this. I'll leave you with a couple of questions that I want to end, so that leave us a little bit of leverage towards the end. What would you like to see in the future of coffee? What's your coffee mission? And hopefully what's next for you, which I sort of know, but the stage is yours.
So for me, many people know me now as a coffee scientist and a competitor. But most recently, I spent a lot of time studying sustainability. And I'm honest with the listeners, sustainability was very far away from where I come from. But once you understand and your heart beats with origin, you start fighting for it. And even there are now baby steps, and it took me a long time to understand and learn. I really want to spend more time making coffee better, the value chain, and more fair, especially towards the origin countries, and not just tastier. I think that is very, very important. And as I said, I think we have to democratize specialty coffee to make it more accessible to also the commercial coffee drinkers. And we have to take them by the hand and guide them towards specialty coffee, so we have a bigger and better impact at origin. I truly believe in this.
Yeah, and I appreciate, and I think sustainability is such a buzzword, isn't it?
Yes.
It's such a, I'm sure that if you put in the trends words of 2020, it's right up there amongst, I don't know, vaccine. But I think that often humans, and I'm not, pointing fingers, but often humans kind of wait, and they have the approach of, well, someone will figure it out, we'll be fine, I'll wait until that day. But reality is that I'm a big fond and big believer of individuals' actions, and this goes with literally what we are in control of. There's so much that we're not in control of, right? Whether it's you believe in conspiracy theories, whether you believe in politicians being corrupted, whatever it is, a lot of stuff is out of your control. The weather, what's in your control is your individual impact on the environment. In fact, it's called footprint because it's 1 foot and it's yours, the end. And it's astonishing that still we buy products that take an insanely amount of land, water, resources for 100 grams worth of food that you can get at a much better rate in terms of the resources needed. It's incredible how we buy tomatoes, oranges, tomatoes in winter imported from the other side of the world. Imagine the impact just on tomatoes being imported from across the globe, and yet we don't seem to connect the dots that we are in control of our choices and decisions. So I want to hear your take on that, and that will close it off.
So that's, for example, why I started to get involved into oat milk produced in Switzerland, actually just 20 minutes now from where I live. Because oat milk is amazing, but I don't believe that we should ship oat milk from Sweden to Switzerland, because we can grow it next door and we can support our local farmers, but we still don't have the know-how to make it tasty. So we can learn from that, and each and every one individual can contribute. And I didn't run, and then I started being an ultra trail runner. I was a marketeer, and then I competed. So now next mission is sustainability. So I think each and every one of us can do. It's not about finger pointing how bad others are or how bad I was myself. It's okay, understand, we need to move on and then start moving. And even if it's baby step, that's big enough.
That's it. I love it. 100%. I could not top that off. I I really thank you for bringing this topic up. I think that we haven't covered sustainability in this podcast yet, and that's why I love having all different type of people coming on the show. And it is something that I'm very passionate about. It's often something I don't really talk too much about, especially when it comes to my choices of what I eat, because I know people get quite defensive. But I think it's important to at least have a knowledge of where your food comes from, what impact it has had all the way from start to plate. Like, no, like literally from start to plate. And then maybe people will start looking at their own consumer choices and decision in a very different way.
Yes. And you know, this is also now happening in coffee, just what you said, from cradle to grave. That's, for example, how we look at the CO2 emissions or the carbon footprint of coffee machines. And there is an analysis called life cycle analysis. And that's, for example, where you can understand how much CO2 emissions are within the production with the usage. And then when you analyze where the big chunks of the CO2 emissions come from, then you can measure and you understand in what way you have to improve a coffee machine to take it back to coffee. And it's also the same when we look at dairy milk alternatives. Almond looked amazing, but CO2 is very good, but the amount of water you need is maybe not so good. So that's where a scientific approach is good. And then I know about your dietary. I mean, very good. Other people, they do it differently. It's good to not finger point at others and just let 100%. Everybody start moving. But as you said, together we can do great.
I think you're right, 100%. In fact, that's why I never go too out of my way, because it's important. It's a personal journey, and it's important for people just to know. I think just knowing will allow you to make certain different choices and decisions. And you can have a sustainable diet, but then you might buy a cup takeaway coffee every day. So and then I think it's important. I want to leave it with this. This is my last sentence, and then I read something nice that I've written for you. I think we need to be comfortable with the idea that perfection doesn't exist. We're always going to cause a certain amount of harm, and that's okay to accept that. And Los Cafés del Arrieros wrote, Andre, you never stop growing as a human being. You're our inspiration source here at Los Cafés del Arriero. Muchas gracias. Thank you. And Andre, it's been a pleasure having you, and I hope to have you back on. Maybe we could do a live session together in the same room when you come to Melbourne.
In Melbourne, definitely. That would be amazing. And then we make some tasty espresso. That would be really cool.
I miss espresso because I can't make it here. But thank you, Andre. It's been a real treat, a real honor and pleasure to have you on. And I will send you a message just after this. Thank you again for popping by, and you have an amazing day ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, and goodbye to Australia and Melbourne, my new home, and please stay safe and strong.
We will. We need to, so that you can come here. Thanks, mate.
Cool.
Thank you, Andre.
Bye.
There you have it, guys. We're just down the line. We just had an amazing chat with Andre. It's about 45 seconds left, so I'll wrap it up. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Andre, especially, but thank all of you sending amazing questions, amazing messages. I really appreciate it. If you're new, feel free to follow us. We do this about 3 times a week. We post this as a podcast, as a YouTube, and feel free to share this with your friends on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever fancies you. And a big shout out to all the people that have been all the way through, Os Consort, Los Cafés del Arriero, Soha, Don Bacon, all of you. So we got 20 seconds left. Thank you very much. I will close it off now, and take care and be safe.